right, we're recording. We're just going to go right into the podcast, just from what we're talking about. We're talking about Twitter, live here with Jeffrery Tucker here at Porcfest. Jeffrery Tucker yesterday introduced RFK Jr. for a talk that he gave up here. I thought a fantastic.
What, talk or introduction?
You gave an introduction for
I'm
RFK.
just saying, what was fantastic, my introduction or the talk?
Both.
Okay.
Both were fantastic.
Okay.
Yours may be a little bit more fantastic than RFK's. That's a lie. That's a lie. So
before they when they asked me to introduce him, they said we'd be so honored if you would introduce RFK. Don't make it longer than 3 minutes. so I had to
we
time
will
that
pull
up
you
there.
off the stage
Yeah.
if it's 1 second longer than
Yeah.
3 minutes.
It was interesting because one doesn't know what to say beyond, flattering the speaker or something like that. But I just had noticed right before I got on stage that it's been 40 months since the lockdown. And that number 40 has this strange significance in our religious traditions. There's 40 years in the desert. I think Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days before preparing his ministry, and so on it goes, right? The number 40. So here we are at the 40 months. So that's the way I began it, with this imagery of 40 days and 40 months, and is this the moment of our liberation? The truth is that RFK was out there from the very beginning on this whole thing, and it really was just like a bright comet in the sky. We were all suffering under lockdowns. We didn't know what the hell was happening. They said, well, you have to lock down to get away from the bad disease, and then we did that. And they said, we don't like being locked down. They said, not a problem, just put on this mask. And then we still were locked down, so now we're locked down with a mask. And then we said, we don't like these masks. And they said, well, don't worry about it, just get this vaccine. So we got the vaccine, but now we have MR, spike protein in our blood, plus a mask, plus lockdown. And in the midst of all this, RFK came up with this great book called The Real Anthony Fauci, which is a very interesting title because it's not really about, it is about Fauci, but it's about a lot more than that. It's a reconstruction of the biomedical security state since World War II. So if you thought that the idea of lockdowns and, a despotism by big pharma was invented in February of 2020, he's got another story to tell you.
Yeah, and I think that we'll just get right into RFK's talk. I mean, one of the most interesting parts for me, which he was basically reciting it from his book, right? Talking about really this cover-up, which now it's kind of even more interesting because recently it's been proven that COVID was made in a lab, right? That's beyond a shadow of a doubt. We now know that with recent revelations.
I mean, I would say, I would phrase it that there's a lot of evidence that points to that direction.
Significant evidence. And with it wasn't just a conspiracy theory with RFK spouting off. He connected the dots and talked about the CIA's involvement in funding, the NIH's involvement in funding the Wuhan laboratory,
the gain of function research.
Right.
The important thing about that talk was that I think a lot of times we think of gain of function research as you're trying to get ahead of the new flu strain, or you're trying to get ahead. You try to anticipate the new mutation of the virus. So what RFK did yesterday, and he didn't say this is what I'm going to do. But what he explained is the real purpose of gain of function research is biowarfare.
He called it a bioweapon.
Yeah, it's a bioweapon. So this is all revelation to me. But these things are all linked. They're not trying to cure next season's virus. They're trying to create weapons of mass destruction, or as he put it in his talk, he said a poor man's nuclear weapon. That was amazing. This was not a normal stump speech.
No. Well, that's interesting because I wonder how much of this was tailored to knowing the crowd that he's talking to, who have already a high level understanding of what's happened over the past few years.
I think what I really think, and I've heard him talk a lot, and I've spent some time with him, that sort of thing. He is fundamentally an educator, and he's a researcher, and he's got a passion for truth. And when he discovers things that are not well known. He uses the microphone and his platform to teach them. So that's why he's got this pedagogical style about him. And his memory, his recall of names and dates is actually quite remarkable. It's amazing.
It is remarkable, and people talk about his voice. How is he going to be able to talk and go on the campaign trail? Well, he did a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan and had absolutely no issue talking for 3 hours. And honestly, the more I hear him and the more I hear him talk, the less I notice the voice.
You don't hear it. Yeah, that's really true. The first time, with it lasts for about 10 seconds, and then you adjust your ears slightly, and then it's all fine, and then it all seems normal after that. So initially they thought that was going to make it impossible for him to be a viable politician. They said, well, you can't be a politician with that voice. Actually, it has the opposite effect. It's strange sounding, so you listen more carefully.
Yeah.
So there's that. The second thing they thought was they thought they would kill him by calling him an anti-vaxxer.
See, that is so one of the most interesting parts about this whole COVID thing we've been through, right? Has been, as we've all learned about, the nefarious characters behind it, Anthony Fauci, and it's woken a lot of people up to not just the COVID vaccine being potentially dangerous, but let's look at every vaccine now,
and the whole suite of products from the pharmacological from Big Pharma, right? So it's blasted open the entire field, and when we're talking about pharma, we're talking about our health, which is to say our lives. Yeah. So it's a very important feature of the human experience. Which is one of the reasons when I started Brownstone, I did it in light of lockdowns, so that we could address this essential issues of human liberties and human rights, and that's my life and that's my concern. But there is a overlap here with the medical side of things, and I schooled myself as quickly as I possibly could in the early days about infectious disease and immunology, the history of pandemics and the state response to it, and got pretty good at it. However, with Brownstone, I really wanted to expand it beyond that to issues of health and the influence of the state and state-connected industries on our lives. Right. And so that's why I've teamed up with the FLCCC, which is an organization of doctors that came up with a protocol to address the problem of COVID at a time when the NIH and CDC was not paying any attention to how do you get well if you get sick. That was not an issue because they just wanted to ban everything to wait for the vaccine, which is one of the greatest scandals of our lives. But the FLCCC said, no, there are things you can do.
For those who don't know, they might, maybe they're not informed, but what does the FLCCC stand for?
Well, I think it's called Frontline COVID Care, Critical Care Alliance, something like that. But that's the thing. So it was an organization started out of COVID, but all of our talks this week are about health and vitamin D and all these things that are related to pharma. What can you trust from your doctor? What can't you? What's the problem with our food supply? It opens. It's a window to everything, right? So I've kind of outsourced that scientific medical side of Brownstone to FLCCC while we focus on issues of human rights, human liberties, censorship, corporatism, and so on. But together we're make very nice sister organizations. We've got a whole suite of talks here this week.
Let me ask a question, a quick poll of the crowd. So who, since COVID happened, who has changed in some way your relationship with your doctor maybe, or how you look at the medical establishment? Whose outlook has changed in that way?
I certainly have. Yeah.
Every single person is basically raising their hand. Yeah. Brian says we hated them from the get-go, and I mean, just to a certain degree, yes. Me personally, I've always been skeptical to a degree of doctors and what are they trying to do? Are they trying to profit from selling a certain drug? But I think things have changed entirely when you start to realize just. Sure, doctors went to school and they did all the schooling, they memorized all this information, but they're not even up to date on the newest technologies, on the newest changes to diet that can impact supplements.
Or the basics of nutrition. Yeah. Which is a course that is not offered in medical school, as incredible as that seems. So your sense of that was mine too, which I'm suspicious of these. I mean, the AMA basically took over American, the nationalized American allopathic medicine back in, something like 1913, with the monopolization of the medical schools and that sort of thing. So I've always been a little suspicious and always, a bit of a dabbler in home remedies and that sort of thing. But I had no idea of the scale of it. Like when you say 5 years ago, imagined scenarios under which America would fall to totalitarian control and we'd be have our churches shut down, small businesses closed, domestic capacity restrictions so you can't and travel restrictions so you can't attend your grandmother's funeral, and so and asked you what is going to provoke that, you might have said something like, well, an asteroid attack, or I don't know, something else, right? Another 9/11. You would not have said a seasonal coronavirus with a 99.97% survival rate for everybody under 70. I mean, that's not the so it's a fascinating thing to explore how this all came to be, and a lot of my research over the last 3 years has been on that topic.
So let's pivot back for a minute to talk about RFK and the campaign itself. So you were asked to give the introduction. Are you affiliated in any way with the campaign, or is that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
So I thought that was interesting. I think the theory might have been that there was going to be a lot of skeptics towards him, and that if I stood up and introduced him, somebody
a friendly face.
Well, something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I have to say that I'm a fan. I think he's done a lot of good. Now I have some doubts about his worldview and his political outlook. I think he's wedded to that kind of good government liberalism of the 1950s and 60s that I long ago personally rejected. On the other hand, I can imagine worse things, So,
well, we were just having a discussion with Scott Horton, and which turned into a fantastic Scott Horton rant about RFK. But so what he was talking about is, he's out there really addressing these things at the core. People call him a conspiracy theorist, an anti-vaxxer, but he has the receipts to back it up. He knows the history, right? So from that perspective, libertarians love that. So he has to be sure to be able, if he does want to attract, libertarian-leaning people, right-wing type people, in one respect, he has to be sure to continue to say that as his campaign grows, maybe and gets on a higher level, a national level. But at the same time, he's running as a Democrat, so he has to be able to attract liberal voters. So like we were talking about with, the classic Kennedy, like his father or his uncle, he has to be able to attract voters by talking about welfare and taking care of people.
Oh, that's true. But the way you put it is interesting to me, because you're presenting it as if he's mapping out a strategy for himself.
Maybe he's not mapping out.
So
strategy.
I don't believe that. I don't think he's doing that at all. I think he's.
Do you think he should be mapping out a strategy? Like
no, I don't. I mean, I don't think there are any rules these days. And the less you listen to campaign consultants, probably the better off you're going to be. I mean, his spontaneous, intuitions are going to be better than what any speechwriter writes for him. So I think his view is that he's going to trust his intuition over what is true. He's never going to condescend to voters. He's going to talk at a very high level, and he's going to speak to the America that that his father and his uncle believed existed, and he believes exists. I'm not sure it exists anymore. But I have to tell you, it's kind of exciting to hear him talk, because you think maybe we can put it back together again. It
is. It
makes you a little hopeful.
It's hard to explain. Just telling friends or whatever. Yeah, I'm going to hear RFK Jr. talk. If I said that like 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be like, well, why would I want to go to that? But there's a different energy to it, in that he does have that Kennedy name. Yeah, and you alluded to it there. He's authentic. I mean, he's not. He is a very wealthy person, of course. He doesn't have to be doing this.
No, and to that extent, his seeming ideological migrations that we're watching in real time come from a very sincere place. He's trying to figure it out, and the issue on guns is a great one, because he was somehow convinced that there was this relationship between the school shootings and excessively liberal gun laws or permissions, but now he's asked about that. You can tell he's not quite sure anymore. He certainly there might be a pharmacological route to these school shootings, and he also said the Supreme Court has read the Second Amendment very broadly. That is a law of land, and I'm going to stick by that. And he said, and these times when every right in the Bill of Rights is being attacked, first, third, fourth, sixth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and so on, all being attacked, this is the worst time to be seen to be going against what people believe is their essential rights, which is the Second Amendment right. And that's why he puts it. I think that comes from a sincere place.
Yeah, I think it does too. And I mean, there was some libertarian chatter, some pushback about at the speech yesterday. There were metal detectors, and what I say about that is, if anyone gets a pass on that, it's a Kennedy.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I completely agree with you. Like honestly, this is not the time to. And I was imagining, and we love our Porcfesters, but they don't always have the best filter. And I was imagining somebody come up to him and say, "Listen, if somebody shoots you, I promise you that person will be dead in a second," which is probably true, but that's more.
But you're still shot.
But that's also what happened to his uncle, right? So I get it. This was not the time to test out the theory of more guns, less crime. At least not to his mind. So, but I thought he did a wonderful job, and so the other thing I really like about him is he's just how disruptive this is, to the Democratic Party of all things. I mean, as far as I can tell, the DNC is entirely a deep state party. I mean, that's all it is, And he's saying, well, maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe it can be the party of my father and my grandfather. Maybe there are voters out there who are not connected to the deep state that would like to have a different person to support. And he seems to be right about that so far. I mean, there's a real possibility, I guess, I'm not a political guy, but that he could win the New Hampshire primary. What happens then?
Yeah, it's remarkable that I'm even considering changing my registration to a Democrat to vote for him.
So let me ask you, what is it just that nostalgia? If that means something to me. He's making me nostalgic.
I don't even know.
Funny way.
I don't even know what I'm nostalgic for. But,
well, maybe in America where I don't know, where rights are taken seriously.
I think you're right. Yeah, I don't know if that America exists. Maybe we've gone too far down the path to be able to turn things around. I know I heard an interview recently with Ron Paul on Timcast, and they were talking about presidential candidates, and they asked him about Dave Smith running for president. And I don't want to misquote Ron Paul, but essentially what he said was, "Well, the ship has sailed. We've gone too far. We can't turn things around at this point."
But RFK reminds me of Ron Paul in a lot of ways, because they're both extremely well educated, very, highly intelligent, but also idealistic people. And I used to work for Ron, and the thing that always struck me about him was his incredible sincerity. I mean, there wasn't a malicious bone in this guy's body. I mean, he really just believed in liberty, and he never had a dark heart. He didn't have a dark outlook. He really just believed in the capacity of this country to turn around, and I see that same kind of spirit in RFK. And I have to say I welcome it, because the last 3 years have really, I would say, sort of damaged us all. I mean, certainly I've been woefully damaged. I used to be this techno-optimist. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be great, thanks to LinkedIn or whatever the hell my theory was. Well, I was wrong.
You start to look at, it got to a point with COVID, you realize, well, every major corporation, they're forcing their employees to get this vaccine. They're forcing their employees to mask. If you don't do it, you're losing your job. You're losing your livelihood. And you're like, what can we do? How can we push back against this? And at least RFK has given us, sort of a platform to start to push back against it.
And ultimately, I think our struggle is a spiritual struggle, in the sense that this is something we libertarians are really bad at, is kindling a sense of hope in people, and a belief that if you take charge of your lives, that you can actually shape the world in which you live, and And RFK has really tapped into that, and it's meant a lot to me. And we are coming out of 3 years and 3 months of living hell. I mean, I don't believe that anybody really expected anything like that would happen to us, And even the dreariest, darkest libertarian, gloom and doomer prepper, never imagined that you would have in this country drones policing domestic residences for having too many cars out front and so on. I mean, that we would destroy 3.4 million small businesses, whatever. It's just inconceivable. But that happened to us. What does that do to the human spirit? Well, you can look at the demographics about suicide and substance abuse and depression and so on, all of which they're going to cure with new drugs, by the way, You notice
That's
that?
what they want.
Yeah. So the effect on the American spirit has been just devastating. It's crushed us all. And I tell you, and you know stories, I know stories. Every listener has terrible stories of what happened in these years. And in many ways, we are a broken, even shattered people. We are survivors of a grotesque calamity. So in these times, you need voices of hope. And that's not Biden, So I think RFK is playing a very important role. Like, even if he doesn't go anywhere politically, I think he's made a massive contribution to the culture. And we have no choice. We cannot just sink into the pit. This is our lives. We have limited time in this world. What are we going to do with it? Are we just going to sit around and go, well, I guess America was great once, and it sucks now, and then I'm going to die soon. That is not a life anybody wants to live. We have to live with hope and the belief that we have the power to change things.
Yeah, and I think even what he's done so far, just to this point, has been a tremendous contribution. And from the point of getting people to question big pharma. Getting people to take ownership of of their own bodies, of what we're eating, of what we're consuming.
That's not been a political issue for my lifetime ever. I've never heard anybody talk like this.
And yes, there is the aspect of it where he's on Joe Rogan. He was talking about autism and vaccines. I have no idea if vaccines cause autism, but the people who say they don't can't give another cause. So we really don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I don't really have a strong opinion on that either, but I would like to know.
Yeah.
And I would like there to be a free discussion about it. Like, let's have some talk about it. Can we not really talk about this?
And which he did talk about in his talk yesterday with using the NIH and using federal agencies to be able to, pierce, how did he phrase it? Pierce the, Pierce the veil of the what's the word I'm looking for?
Pierce the. There's something. It's like a
bosom.
that allows access to that data that typically
that information that
you're not able to get to be able to do the analysis, to look at it and see what is the correlations between vaccines and autism, or video games and autism, or whatever. To be able to study it.
If it's not true, I'd like to know that. If it is true, I'd like to know that. I mean, but I tell you what, they're not going to get away with the silence anymore. This Peter Hotez, who is demanding that. Joe Rogan invited Hotez to debate RFK, and Hotez said, "Well, I'm not going to do anything like that, because that's beneath me, and science is not, a thing for public debate. We write papers for journals," and you know what that means, right? I mean, these journals are all funded by the big pharma, and he's on, getting massive grants from them. So he invites his friends. So they're just sitting and they're just in a bubble celebrating each other. That's what science is. Just those of us who agree with each other, getting on the take from industry. But he's not getting away with it, I also think it's fascinating how in the last 48 hours, I must have seen 50 articles in the mainstream press saying, Hotez is right. He should never debate RFK. That's a terrible idea. He's a man of courage for refusing to debate RFK. That's what they say. Well, that's so interesting. And which goes to another thing that's been revealed to us, is the extent to which 5 or 6 main media channels in this country are really just tools of the deep state. I mean, can you imagine believing that 5 years ago? I didn't.
I didn't either. I mean, maybe you have suspicions, but now it's like
Yeah.
blatantly obvious.
Well, we used to think they were sort of biased.
Yeah.
But no, we didn't know they were actually voices
Yeah.
of the government. Jeez.
And well, I mean, it's a good point, and Brian just gave me a cue here. So you're talking about mainstream media, right? But how much impact does mainstream media have now? Sure, some people read it, some people listen to CNN. I don't know how many people, but you have voices out there like Tucker Carlson, who shares a nameness with you to some degree.
But I'm not going to go there with you on believing that somehow they're all falling apart, they're discredited, and we're taking it over, because I don't believe that. I don't think we're anywhere near that. When
you're saying that we're not near. I'm not saying we're near taking over
I don't
the media.
think that they're anywhere near having been, that point of being discredited. I mean, the problem is that the mainstream media, combined with social media, monopolizes about 95% of the information communications the average person is getting. I mean, it's great that Tucker Carlson
based on the algorithms, but Tucker Carlson is still getting millions and millions of views.
And it's great.
On
We're
Twitter.
making progress, but we've just got a long way to go. And I don't think we need to be naive about that. And I'll tell you a quick story about this. You run a website, you watch your podcast. How many people listen to your podcast? You get excited.
Tens of millions.
Tens of millions. Oh, yeah, that's great. Well, that's great. Maybe you're right and I'm wrong. But early on in the pandemic, really early, I wrote an article called about how Woodstock happened in the middle of a pandemic, right? And so it was fact-checked as true. And Zuckerberg's algorithms at that time were not very sophisticated. And they were wired to say, if fact-checkers say something's true, then we're going to push it. And he did. And over the course of a week, that thing got millions. I've never seen web traffic like that. I've never seen reach like that.
That's when he bought that hat, was after that.
I'd never seen anything like it. I felt like it introduced me to the power and the reach of these platforms, that once they're united in purpose, they can really dominate a conversation.
Yeah, well, it's like, I mean, this isn't a political example, but I don't know if you've heard of the comedian Matt Rife, who came out of absolutely nowhere. And to me, he's not very funny, but all of a sudden, it's all I see on my Instagram reels, my Facebook reels. And I don't know if it's, him,
that's good, yeah.
with advertisements, or if he's being pushed on us for some reason.
We can outsmart him. I just think it's going to take a lot of work and more. I don't think it's inevitable, I guess is my main point. We have to keep fighting.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely not inevitable. Yeah. And I mean, people talk about Twitter and what Elon has done for Twitter for free speech. And we were talking about before the show. Well, not necessarily, as he is censoring some words and some different things. But
on the other hand, it's the only mainstream social media platform that is even plausibly approaching the possibility of free speech. I mean, that's an incredible. Where would we be without that? I mean, it's all these social media platforms. You know all the names. They dominate 95%. Like, I'm really happy for Gitter and Parler and whatever the rest of these things, but that's a tiny fraction of the market. So, Twitter has been just an amazing gift. And I'll tell you something else that's really interesting to me right now. There are very powerful lawsuits that are extant right now, Missouri, Biden, and so on. And they're being litigated in our favor, by which I mean freedom. All the judges are like, well, this government can't outsource its censorship ambitions to private industry and embed federal employees and these companies, and that this is contrary. They're all saying this, but here is what's interesting. And the discovery we've generated about 20,000 pages of proof that this is what's going on, and even using the fact checkers as quasi censors, as proxies for the real censors. I mean, this is all extremely well documented from the very top. Now, here's the problem. If these lawsuits are succeeding, and yes, they're probably going to end up the Supreme Court, and yes, the Supreme Court will side for the First Amendment in 3 to 5 years, whatever it's going to be. I don't know, but we're winning in every way you can possibly define that term winning. But even as that is happening, they're still doing it.
Yeah, and they're going to do it in different ways.
So it's a really interesting issue. Like, if you were running a social media company and you really believed that by cooperating with the NSA and the NIH and the FBI and the CIA was going to get you in trouble, wouldn't you stop? So this is the problem.
Yeah.
This is the problem. If these lawsuits are decided on our behalf, what is the mechanism by which we stop them from doing it in the future? What is that system?
We're not gonna win a class action lawsuit for.
I don't know. I mean, and also, what's the penalty?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly no jail. We're not talking about criminal lawsuits. These are civil lawsuits. So what? The government throws a few bucks this way or that way. They pay the court costs. I don't know what. But then, what happens then? How do we enforce it? I mean, who's going to be the government to rule the government? I don't know. I don't know. And what troubles me is that this censorship is ongoing every day. But just 2 days ago, Jordan Peterson interviewed RFK. And their video was taken down off YouTube for vaccine disinformation. So it's no different now than it was 2 years ago. No different. Despite all the success of all these lawsuits and the discovery and all the debate and everything, nothing's changed. Why is that? So it worries me. It worries me because I'm concerned that the mechanisms that we, meaning Western civilization and the Constitution and the framers and all the, put in place to restrain the government are not working the way they're supposed to work. Like, even if it works perfectly, it's not actually going to work. What then?
Well, this is Porcfest, so I know the answer. Bitcoin solves it. So we got, 15, 20 minutes left. If there's anyone in the crowd that has a question they would like to ask Jeffrey, we can do that.
I have a question. All right, so this is what I was trying to get at. I'm just going to lead. I'm just going to fuck the mic up. So this is what I was trying to get with the Tucker Carlson mouthing at you. Basically, I don't know if you know this, Jeffrey, but yesterday, I believe, Tucker Carlson did about a 20-minute episode on Twitter, literally talking about RFK explicitly and Peter Hotez. But I wanted to know your take on the impact that can have of, if you can get Tucker Carlson as a 70 million views a Twitter stream now behind RFK, what kind of a game changer might that be?
And look, I want to be the optimist, and I am thrilled by that. I think I looked at it after 14 hours and had about 14 million views. It's probably up to 70 now, and I think of the combined his 6 episodes are in the hundreds of millions. So thank God for Tucker Carlson, so I can say. I mean, I'm just wow, huh? I mean, he has just been incredible. A lion of liberty, so to speak.
He used to be back in the day. We were speaking of Ron Paul earlier. Didn't he MC that Ron Paul event in, what was that, 2008?
Yeah, he's always had a libertarian streak. I knew him when he was an intern at the Heritage Foundation, back in the old days. And he's always been a little bit libertarian-ish. The fascinating thing about Tucker is he played, I'm not sure how many people know this, but he played a really important role in convincing Trump to lock down.
Really?
Yeah.
How so? Can you expand on that?
There's a guy named Matthew Pottinger who is fluent in Mandarin and worked for the National Security Council under Trump, whose wife is Taiwanese, and he spent a lot of time embedded in Beijing. He's considered to be a China hawk and trusted by all the China hawks and the conservatives. And he hangs around the right cocktail parties. He's beloved in Washington by all of our friends. And one day, he arrived in Washington with a very bad news that a very, very bad virus has leaked from the Wuhan lab, and it was on its way here. So, we'd better lock down right away, just like Xi Jinping did, because he got rid of the virus. We will have to do the same thing. So, he went to Trump and pleaded with him to follow the China model and get rid of this virus. And he was trusted because he hung around the right cocktail parties and he was a China hawk. And he's the one who made that initial call to Carlson. And when you get a call from a big shot at the National Security Council telling you inside information but swearing you to secrecy, but trusting you because you have the president's ear.
And it's a virus that could kill us all.
Yeah. What do? You believe it. And he believed it. So he and his wife went to Mar-a-Lago and put his arm around Trump and said, this is the time. This is the time to be great. To be truly great. We need to stop this virus. We need to lock down, shut down the economy. Trump's a little skeptical. I don't know. I mean, lock down the... Can you do that? Can you just... is there a switch?
Can you just make everyone stay in their house and not leave?
And that makes the virus go away? I mean,
don't we have a constitution or something?
But immediately Fauci was there to say, look, he's right about this. He's right about this. And I tell you something better. Xi Jinping locked down and controlled the virus. That's great. We can do one better because we have a new platform technology called mRNA. We can generate this vaccine by the summer. So here's the way it is, Mr. Trump. You lock down, you protect the American people from this virus. By summer, we're going to get the antidote. You mean like in the movies? Yes, just like in the movies. And, you think about what does greatness look like? FDR, Wilson, Lincoln, Trump. Trump saves the country from the Chinese bioweapon. That can be you, Mr. President. That can be you. That was on March 10th, only a few days after that Mar-a-Lago meeting with Tucker Carlson. True story. So Tucker has done a lot to reverse the damage of that day.
Thank you for sharing that. That is a story I have not heard anywhere else.
I know too much about this stuff.
Do we have any more questions? Anyone else out there with a question?
By the way, I'd love to get Matthew Pottinger on this podcast. I have some questions for him.
Yeah, we'll do our best.
Yeah. It would be nice if I could say his name, Pottinger. Is that
Pottinger, yes, that's okay. China Hawk.
Well, is there anything else that when you agreed to this interview, which I asked you about just a few hours ago, that you were hoping to talk about that I have not asked you about that you'd like to?
That's okay. It's a sort of thing. Well, let me just say this. If we have not been changed, if we have not grown up, we've not been educated, we've not had our worldview shifted in some sense over the last 3 years, you're either a perfect prophet or you've been asleep or you're just completely indifferent. I've changed a lot. I have. Mm-hmm. I think we all have. So I think it's a time for that combination of humility. Like, we need to learn. We need to study and understand things. We also need to be more ferocious than we've ever been. This is not a parlor game anymore. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with real life now. Libertarians used to sit around, debate, talk with them, like we're little versions of Bukharin and Marx or something like that. We have to solve all the problems in our heads. Well, it's not in our heads anymore. It's in the real world. It's us. It's our liberties. It's our lives. It's our families. It's our communities. It's devastating. Liberty is the source of life. Liberty and human rights is what makes the world great. We know it. It's our job to share that with the world and to fight in every single way. Do I have the perfect plan? I don't. But we cannot go back to the way we were. We cannot just keep playing these parlor games anymore. Everything is at stake. I mean everything. I really believe this. I think civilization itself is on the precipice. Everything that's been built over 500 years, if not 1,000 years, if not 1,500 years, or thousands of years, is being threatened right now.
Shut off the power for a week and see chaos in the streets. It's
so
terrifying.
Anyway, I don't have the answer, but I'll just tell you a quick story about Brownstone. And Brownstone is a powerful but sort of small organization. Mostly what we do is sanctuary work. We take scientists who've been professionally displaced and adopt them and give them the freedom to write and think.
Like Dr. Peter Hotez.
You have to write a pretty good application letter. But my mother is the one who came up with the name Brownstone. And the reason for that was that because I was coming up with a series of Greek and Latin names, and she said, nobody's gonna go to your website. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. What's wrong with you? And she said, the stone that built America was the brownstone because it was cheap, it was malleable, you could cut it in any different directions, it was really durable. And before commercialized steel was available in the mid 1800s, all the important churches and civic buildings and schools and houses were made out of brownstone. And I'm sorry, my son, I never wanted to live in this world, but we are starting over. We have to start over. We have to rebuild this country.
I mean, I think that's the perfect way to end the podcast, to end the show. And, this is something we talk about a lot on, my show, Finding Freedom, and Brian's show, Mean Age Daydream. As libertarians, like you just talked about, for so long we had these, hypothetical discussions. And if COVID did nothing else, it slapped us in the face and said, it's time to wake up.
We needed that.
And start taking action, right?
We needed that.
And you said, none of us have the answer. You don't have the answer. No. I don't have the answer. And I think it's an individual answer on what you do in your own personal life or for your family in order to help yourself prepare for these changing times. Yeah. So just one more time, I will ask you, please plug the Brownstone, plug anything else that you're working on.
It's brownstone.org. We publish a lot of books. Buy all of our books. Get on the email list. That's really important because if we don't have that contact information, God knows they could shut us down tomorrow. Right? I mean, it's really very bad. We're also on 20 social media channels. So we're doing our best to get the word out.
It's a lot of social media.
Thank you for having me on and letting me talk as expansively as I have.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.